Welcome to Below the Line, where we talk about working in Hollywood from the crew perspective. My name is Skid. I'm a former assistant director and your host.
Quiet on the set.
Welcome back for season 27. If you've been following the podcast for a while, thanks for sticking with us. We are continuing this season to release both audio and video edits of the episodes. So if you're only listening, consider checking us out on YouTube as well. Today, we're talking about Pretty Lethal, the Uma Thurman ballerina action thriller that is currently streaming on Prime. And my guest is the director, Vicky Jewson. Vicky, welcome to Below the Line.
Thanks so much for having me.
Very glad to have you here. Joining me in the co-host chair this week is First Assistant Director Katie Carroll. Katie, always a pleasure.
Thanks, Skid. So happy to be here.
This is going to be fun. Warning for listeners, today's conversation will contain spoilers, so go check out the movie and come back and join us. Vicky, to start us off, tell us a little bit about your background and how this film came together.
So I have made movies since I was a kid. It's always been my dream, and I was particularly in love with the action genre. And as I was growing up, there were very few women on screen in those movies. There was Ripley in Aliens, there was Uma Thurman in Kill Bill. And so I kind of made it my mission as I started working in the business professionally to tell stories that spotlighted women in the action genre. And for me, that works best when specificity is at the heart of it. So when I got the script to Pretty Lethal, that's what really leapt out at me, was the fact that this world of ballet was very present on every single page. And that specificity of bringing ballet to the action space and using the skill set of a ballerina who is severely, super dedicated, really high pain threshold, an extreme athlete, basically, made me think we could do something that we hadn't seen before, and that I could do it with a level of authenticity and then have fun with it. And that's what grabbed me about the project.
I think that's a very interesting point, Vicky, is that the ballerina aspect of this is not just window dressing. It's baked into the story. It's baked into the action scenes, all of it. And so it's really how you approach it. And I really like that idea that we're conscious of that up front.
Yes, exactly. That was my method. The first thing I did was I went and spent time at the Royal Ballet in London, and I met a Laurence Olivier award-winning director of dance and 3 prima ballerinas. And I just was like, immerse me in your world. Tell me everything about it. I want to know the gossip. I want to know the training. I watched the classes, and then I bought some stunt people in, and I, in a safe way, just asked them to experiment to see what was possible. And I realized the ballerinas, they carry themselves differently when they walk into a room. There's a confidence about their bodies and their physicality that the man on the street, or the woman on the street, I should say, doesn't have. And they said that they see their bodies as an armor against the world. And that for me was like the click moment, where I knew we could build the whole movie out from that. And added to that, the character of Devora, played by Uma Thurman, her whole life is tied to ballet, and her whole motivation is about ballet. So it is quite unique that the theme ran throughout the entire movie, and it actually brought together, this is a spoiler, the troupe of ballerinas and the villain in a way that you don't normally get to see in action films. You don't normally get to see women helping women rather than facing off at the end. And that really spoke to me. That was the message that I really wanted to tell.
I want to go deeper into a discussion of the stunts that you brought up and how all that worked. But first, how did the film come together? I know you filmed it in Budapest. Is that correct? And then tell me more about just going from the script to make the film a reality and the team you built around getting that done.
It took 4 years to get it made since I joined it. The writer had already been going for about 6 by that point. And It came together and fell apart at a couple of studios first. And then we had to repackage it and we took it to the Berlin film market, where Amazon saw the package and they just completely understood the movie. And I pitched them my vision, and we were in utter alignment, and they jumped on. And then they brought on board a financial partner, a producer partner that they work with called Gulfstream, who also, our first meeting, they were like, tell us, Vicky, what do you need to make this movie? And of course, by that point, I'd spent years planning how to make this movie. So I had a full production plan with a spreadsheet. I'd even done the cash flow. I knew exactly what I needed in prep in order to be able to execute the action at that level. So I said, I'll send you my spreadsheet, but I talked them through it. And they were phenomenal in that they were like, yes, we're going to give you what you need. Go do it.
Now, did you bring in folks that you had worked with before, or did you have to build your team from scratch?
I was really lucky to bring some really key people that I'd worked with before. And I think that's the thing that I most enjoy about where I am in my career now, is that I've been very fortunate to meet and work with incredibly talented people. And we've all fallen in love with each other along the way and created a weird family. And they get to come with me when all our schedules align. So I brought with me my stunt coordinator, Adam Horton of Absolute Hooligans. We also worked with Age 7 North stunt team. So it was like a cross collab. But because we were based out of the UK doing all of our prep, we needed to have a UK base and a UK stunt team. So Adam was the magical answer. And he brings a lot of his team from France. And then I also brought on, who works with me on everything, my husband, who's also my kind of co-producer. He does my second unit directing as well. I also brought on an assistant producer who works with us across all our projects, Nina Brown. I brought on a line producer who I'd been wanting to work with for 14 years. So we knew each other really well, but we hadn't actually done a movie together yet. So that was fantastic. And I didn't get to bring the first that I really wanted, Sean Cameron Guest, which I would then tease my new first about relentlessly every day. He was called David Stafford, and he was absolutely brilliant. And now I have a really difficult situation because I want both of them at the same time all the time.
Well, that's a lucky problem to have, I think.
Yes, it is. Whoever your first is just really affects the tone and sets the tone for the movie. And I really like to create a culture on set of calm and joy and fun. I worked with Michelle Yeoh a few years back, and every day she was like, if we're not having fun, what are we doing? And I completely agree with that. And yeah, I was very lucky. David is a really positive, can-do, joyful person, and he had such good rapport with the cast, and that it fostered this nurturing environment, which I really believe is important when you're creating a movie.
I was going to ask you, because you said you brought in your stunt coordinator, but I also noticed the ballet coordinator, and I'm curious how much there was. I mean, obviously ballet is part of the stunts and stunts are part of the ballet, but like how much coordination was there between the two to make fight sequences balletic yet also stunty? Like, at what point did they overlap? I mean, it feels like they overlapped all the time.
Yeah, for me, it was always going to be ballet first, fight second, because I wanted it to feel like the reality, which was these were girls who were prima ballerinas. They're not John Wick. They're not fighters. So I wanted us to always come at the fights from a dance position first. So I started I brought on board 6 prima ballerinas and this dance director, and they came into the stunt space day one. And the first half of the morning they would pair off with the stunt team and start experimenting and workshopping. And we created like a glossary of ballet moves that we could turn into fight moves. And we filmed all of those before we even got into the previs. We sort of wanted to figure out a new language, which then ended up being called Ballet-Fu. And also, I think the thing that was really amazing was because we auditioned for these dancers. So we were like in all of the dance studios in London, which was an amazing experience, meeting all these amazing prima ballerinas. And when we cast them, we knew who our main cast were, so we were able to get really great doubles. And then our intention was to keep them with us for the entirety of the run of show. And that meant that because we did 7 weeks prep in the UK before we went to Budapest and did 3 weeks on site before we started shooting, those prima ballerinas became stunt people. By the time we were shooting the bar fight, they were able to do like 80% of the stunt work as well, which was really the premise of the movie, right? We actually went out there and proved it was possible.
Now, what about the cast? How much training did they need to do, either from the to be convincing ballerinas, or when you start getting into stunts? And obviously, there's multiple folks working to bring together even a single action sequence.
Yes, I think this is the unique and brilliant thing about working with a producer like Age 7 North, is that their whole métier is the action space. So they understand that prep is essential to success. And so they make sure that that's happening way out. So one of the things that we wanted to do was get each of our cast working with ballet instructors months before they even came to Budapest. So we paired them up with instructors all over the world, wherever they lived. And they did a couple of hours a week for 3 months before they arrived on set. And then when they arrived on location, we did a 3-week ballet boot camp where we took over we had a stunt gym and like a huge big warehouse space. And every day I scheduled their days like summer camp. So it was dance lessons in the morning, then fight training, then rehearsals. And then because the whole movie was shot in this one location, the gift for me was in the afternoons, we would go on the location and we would walk around the spaces and we would start blocking and feeling out the scenes. And then we could also shoot. We'd already shot sort of 3 versions of previs by that point. And I tend to get on the floor with the previs and work with the fight designers to really get those character stories into the action from the get-go. And then we then started to reshoot the previs with the cast, which is a real luxury that doesn't normally get afforded. But it really allows you to see what you can and can't do, when you need to swap for a dance double or a stunt double, and how to plan the shoot itself. So we were able to do all of that and then shoot the previs with the cast on location, which got us as close to the real thing as possible. It's really all just about intense planning.
Yeah, that's true. It's the harder the prep, the easier the shoot.
Exactly. Things are still going to go wrong, right? That's just filmmaking. But you have so many more options if you've planned it.
You have plans B through Z to go to, as opposed to, oh crap, what happened now? Yes, exactly right.
Yes.
I was going to say, I've actually worked with Lana on a show, and I know that she has ballet training from her youth. Do all of the actresses have some ballet training or dance training in their past, or were some starting from scratch?
Some were learning from scratch. All of them had some sort of physical dance background, but obviously Maddie Ziegler has an amazing very well-known dance background. Lana, had worked with the Joffrey Company in LA, which is amazing. Millie had done a bit of tap in her youth. Avantika was a dancer when she was younger, but she hadn't done it for a while. And then Iris would be the first to say she was sort of starting from scratch. Which is phenomenal what they were able to achieve in the time that they had. It was really incredible. And it sort of speaks to their dedication that they put into the film. And they turned up at that day one. They were, and that chemistry that you feel on screen between all of them, it's really there. They really have each other's backs.
That's amazing. Did they like all stay in the same hotel so they could hang out and try and create this camaraderie outside of the set?
Part of the plan was that was why we were all in this one stunt space, and my office was there, well away from the production office and all the stress that we imagine is happening over there. So we were all together all the time, but also all of them were in a hotel, apart from Iris, who brought her cat. So she couldn't stay in the hotel, but she had this lovely apartment, and then she could host like soirees. But then I wanted our first table read to be private, so they didn't feel any pressure from anybody else, and they could like find the characters with me. So we did that in a park opposite our apartment. We were going to do a brunch. My husband's amazing because he used to be a chef, so he always brings people in and cooks food, and that gets everyone around the table relaxed, and we all get to know each other. But I had COVID, so we weren't allowed. Obviously, we couldn't do that. I didn't want to do that. So the solution was to sit in a park and have a picnic. So that was the first time I met the cast off the plane. But it was a real bonding experience. It kind of, set the tone.
Vicky, speaking of setting the tone, I want to ask you about the tutus. We get the young ladies back into the tutus because they're wet but it's not as a joke. I mean, it becomes this central part of sort of owning the ballet aspect of the story. And so I want to hear more about the thinking behind that. It could have gone another direction, by the way, with a different director or in different hands, I think. Talk to me about your decision, again, how the tutus, again, represent and sort of symbolize a lot of the things we're talking about here.
Well, the tutus were one of the reasons why one of the studios that I won't name pulled out of the movie when we had it ready to go, because the marketing team felt that seeing girls kick ass in tutus was sort of like offensive to an audience. But for me, it was always the most empowering image, because what I loved about Pretty Lethal and the promise of it was that we were getting to subvert the world's idea of what a ballerina is. And the white tutu is the sort of ultimate symbol of fragility and delicate femininity. And for me, that felt like the kind of bigger message in the movie, which is like sometimes the world still sees femininity as this sort of perceived weakness. And for me, it was an opportunity to bust that stereotype. So being in those white tutus came from that place for me, which was like, let's give the audience that image and then let's show how tough they are and have fun with it. And it definitely, came from a place of that making that message as opposed to wanting to, I don't know, like I didn't want the male gaze anywhere near it in that respect, if you know what I mean. It's very much about their journey. And we even made sure with the tutus, the length of the tutus, we went for like the romantic classical look because it was longer. And I was constantly on gusset watch, because we didn't want them. You're just wearing a leotard underneath that tutu and you're doing all of these stunts and dance moves. So I felt very protective of them in their tutus, and also very sorry for them whenever they had to wear the point shoes because they're honestly brutal. Their feet look like legitimate ballerinas' feet by the end of the sort of second day. But I do feel my job as a director is to protect my cast, and I take that really seriously.
I was going to ask about how much you shot in order, because clearly, and again, spoilers, blood coming at them and onto their white leotards and white tutus. Continuity would be a huge factor, and it seems like shooting in continuity would be super helpful in this scenario.
Yeah, we weren't able to shoot in continuity at all. So we had 5 sets of tutus, and they were all handmade in London by working with the Royal Ballet. So they weren't cheap. And there was the white ones, there was like a paranoia about them when they were on set. The white tutus, we can't get a speck of dirt on them because we needed them right at the end of the shooting schedule as well. So we had like a gradiated set, and I had to work. Well, costume were really on it, but sometimes there were moments where we'd be like, is it tutu 3 or is it tutu 6? And part of the previs was me sitting down with a spreadsheet working out each injury from the fights and how that would impact on the tutus and where the bloodstains would be and at what point we'd go from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So yeah, and they'd often be running in with even the shoes.
Just please tell me, as an aside, that you had tutu too. Just that would just make me happy. Tutu number 2. Okay, great. Sorry, please continue.
Tutu number 2. No, don't worry. Yeah, we had it with the shoes as well because they got progressively more messed up. So we still had to have like the perfect shoes. And I have this image of wardrobe just wandering around with these plastic bags of point shoes. That'll never leave me.
So not shooting in continuity, was it like, but the house was in continuity or not? Or is it just the forest and the bus stuff? So the beginning and the end, or like, it felt like it was mostly one set.
It was, apart from the first week, it was one set, which was an amazing gift to be able to find the inn and then shoot in it, which created an amazing atmosphere and allowed me this sort of continuity with the camera that I was really looking for. But we had to shoot the end dance in our first week. So, and we had to shoot all, was because of the availability of the theatre, but also it was because the cast were learning that dance in the 3 weeks of prep, the boot camp. And the director of the dance said to me, by the time we get to the end of the shoot, that they're not going to have time every day to do dance rehearsals. Because I mean, talking about First AD's nightmare, the original idea had been that they would still. He came through and he was like, every day I would like to do an hour's warm up dance class before we start shooting. And I was like, what? Because once they were through makeup and then...
That thought is adorable. Yeah. So which I would say, oh, you're so cute.
Exactly. We were like, maybe we could put a bar in the room and they could do it in between takes, but we obviously we needed to turn over, as we all know. It's so high pressured. So the solution was to shoot the dance stuff in the first week while it was fresh in their minds and they were closest to having done all that rehearsing. But that was pretty intense for me and for the crew to be having to do our most complex sequences. I've not shot dance before, so there was a huge amount of prep and figuring out how we were going to do it. And then when we rocked up at the theatre to shoot that end sequence, we had those huge floating light boxes above the stage because they were all LED lights. There were 2,000 bulbs and they flickered. So no, they weren't LED bulbs. We had to replace them all. And then the lights broke and it took 2 hours before we could turn over because of it. And it was day 3. And, you're like, the line producer came on set and he was like, look, this isn't your fault. We could get it on insurance. We probably could go over. But I always feel I shouldn't go over at all unless it's really necessary, particularly in the first week, because I want people to know if I'm going to go over, there's a really good reason and it's worth giving it to me. And I don't want people freaking out in the first week. So I beasted myself that day. I think I lost feeling in my knees when I called cut on time that day and almost fainted on the floor. But that was out of order. And then because of the fight sequences and the complexity of them, we then left the bar fight to do as close to the back end of the schedule as possible. And because we didn't want to shoot nights, we tented the building. So that was quite a specific turnaround with timing. So we had to do all of the nighty stuff in a specific order as well. I mean, I really so little of it was shot in order. But what I used to do in prep was I used to do live Disney tours of the whole movie in the order of the movie. And this is what was amazing about having that location was we could get on set and rehearse it. So we actually would run the film like a play during prep the whole way through in one day. Then everybody would feel it and how it moves through the space, which was a gift.
Well, Vicky, when you're talking about that huge climactic bar fight, which is really a battle royale with our ballerinas and, I don't know, more stunt guys than I think they were just coming up from the basement. It was just lots of guys and everybody's getting killed. And how many days did you have for that? And you say that's like shooting towards the end of your schedule, but it also has to capture some of the dance that's coming later. And talk to me more just about that scene coming together in more detail.
Yes, we had 3.5 days to do that. So obviously the planning of it was really important and we'd prevised it all in advance. So on the day, there was a gigantic spreadsheet and, my job is we're running through and we're ticking off the shots as we go. It's very technical shooting that side of action, but I love it. And we shoot all of that in order because we want to make sure that every single stitch works. And then we have an editor sat on set who's live editing it as we go. So we checking back every 3 hours how the whole thing's connecting, which allows us to do pickups if we need as we go. Oh, that stitch didn't work or that transition wasn't quite right. And it's very exhausting because you're running against the clock and it's very precise, but it's also really satisfying because at the end of that time period, you have there's your movie, it's edited and you watch it and you're like, yeah, it works. We nailed it, So all of that planning, you see it pay off. And for me as well, getting to shoot with people like Maddie Ziegler and Lana, they were able to do so much of their stuff themselves. So Maddie did 99% of all of the dance and the fighting, which allowed me to really push the character moments in the action and feel the story as we were shooting it. We had various stages of that bar fight because I wanted each fight to feel like it progressed Ballet-Fu in some way. I'm a big believer that when you do action, it should have a story. Each set piece should have a story within itself. So I wanted us as an audience to discover Ballet-Fu with the troupe rather than it just turn on and be a thing. So the first fight was all about every woman's worst nightmare being trapped in a basement with a creepy dude and just having to fight with your gut. Really inspired by movies like True Romance and Patricia Arquette in the bathroom. And then the thing that Bones reaches for when her back's against the wall and we really think she might lose is the thing that's her sixth sense, which happens to be ballet. And that's when Ballet-Fu is born. And then the second fight, they're all starting to discover it and to find that need to survive. Bones is becoming the leader. And I saw the second fight as a real opportunity for pushing each of the characters. So we put a big whiteboard up when we were doing the previs and we put each of the characters' names down. We gave each of them a specific skill that related to their ballet power. And then we also linked that to their personality traits. So I wanted Princess to try and run away and have a selfish moment that caused a bad consequence for Bones. So Princess might think about that later And so it had a kind of blend of the grit from the survival and then the balletic beauty of the Ballet-Fu. So by the time we hit the bar fight, we had hopefully earned the opportunity to have a bit of fun with the audience and be able to give a bit of a wink, to have Ballet-Fu hit its peak, and let them really dance. I mean, I love that moment when she goes 6, 7, 8, and they start actually dancing. And my reference for that was that scene in The Gladiator when Russell Crowe's in the Colosseum and he says, "Together!" I played that on set and I was like, I want this, but with dance. And Bones is Russell Crowe. So that's when it then became much more fun in tone and more about really enjoying that Ballet-Fu.
I'm still just loving the Ballet-Fu. It's perfect. So we've talked about them. What about Uma Thurman? Like, I mean, obviously she doesn't do a whole lot of dancing, having, again, spoiler, wooden leg. But what got her into all this, and how did that happen?
She was my dream cast for the part. She'd been on my sort of mood boards and vision books for years in terms of, an iconic action figure who is known across the ages for doing it with such flair and with such authenticity. So we were actually in prep when we still hadn't cast Devora, and Kelly, our producer, said, "Look, let's just send her the script. You never know." I wrote an impassioned letter, and then Uma loved the script and she wanted to meet me, and we did a Zoom. It was probably the most nervous Zoom I've ever done, where I kind of presented her with my vision for the character. She and I instantly clicked. We became partners from that day on, and we started sending images back and forth to each other. She loved my idea that I wanted the inn to be a physical manifestation of that character, and that she'd stopped the clock on the day that her dream was spoiled and wanted to remain in that place. So for me, it was like we were stepping onto the backstage of the Nutcracker as opposed to sort of a ballet themed bar. And I wanted every element of that building to reflect her character. So we started pinging each other back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And she came over to Budapest and my husband cooked his roast chicken. We sat around the table and went through the script together, and Uma gave insights into it, which someone of her caliber, it's just an honor to sit there and hear her take on the character and to refine it together. And I think she had this perfect balance, and what we really worked on, because it's her character, it's a very fine line between being totally outrageously bonkers and also emotionally vulnerable. And Uma was able to show the pain when it really mattered, when we really needed to see the pain of having lost that dream, to understand and go with her when we were being more absurd and bonkers. And I think Uma did that beautifully.
We talk about how difficult it is to schedule all this, and it's clear the amount of prep work that you put in to pull off what this film is. Were there other times, you alluded to the lights not working with the dance hall. Were there other times where you guys were surprised on set, or specific challenges that came up you guys had to solve? Because as you also quipped, that always happens. There's always something. You can't plan your way through.
I'm never going to bring that up. I never want to dwell on that. But yes, of course it happens.
I mean, there's always something probably every day, but in terms of major challenges, I was talking to my husband about this earlier today, being like, I don't feel there was any day that was specifically like a disaster day or a day where we had to really overcome huge odds. I feel quite fortunate in that I did have a really exceptional team and we were able to get what we needed every single day, which I think we may have actually just gone overtime once. So I'm trying to scour my brain for, I think what was most challenging was shooting in that basement. And that was mainly just because of the environment. It was, I wanted to, that was really the basement of that building. And I wanted to have that feeling of that reality of those tight corridors. But when you've got 50, 60, 70 people down and there's only one staircase out, you've got to be very on it from a health and safety point of view. And also, it's just unpleasant to be down there all day long. And that's where the cast were really gritty and great. They just kept going. I mean, the day that we were doing the basement fight, Maddie was covered in the dirt from fighting on the floor. She just was in it, and my monitor room was in like this tiny little side cupboard that smelt of sewage from the pipe above. That I'd say that was challenging. Working in those kind of environments was challenging, but we all pulled together, and it was ultimately, there was never any great disasters.
But actually thinking of that not to go away from all the actresses because they're phenomenal, but how'd you find that in? Because that is almost like another character in the movie, and how big and elaborate it is, and how the look of it.
It was the first location we looked at in Budapest, and we'd drawn out the schematics of the inn, the fictitious inn, how I'd seen it in my head, all the floors. And I had kind of known that there's a particular type of architecture in Eastern Europe from a particular era, and there were these old palaces that were built in that way. So I'd sort of had that in the back of my mind and had used a lot of images online to design how I saw it working. But we walked into this space, and you wouldn't have known it was on one of the main streets in the most touristy bit of Budapest. It's just quite a small front door. And then it's like a TARDIS. And we walked in, and I was like, there's the staircase. There's the bar. That's where I can put the stage. That leads to the kitchen. That leads round the back to this amazing circular staircase. Up there can be Devora's office. And the whole thing matched my imagination, which was amazing. And it was big enough that we could put all of the cast green rooms upstairs as well. And the production office moved there. There was this massive it was like a small 100-seater theatre that was also in that space. That was part of this old palace. And that's where they put the production office in. I just have an image of all the producers on the stage. It was like something you'd see in World War II, like they'd commandeered this old theatre. So if you had to go and have a meeting with them, you'd have to go and walk into this theatre, and they'd all be sat there on the stage behind this long table. But yeah, after we'd seen that location, I was like, we don't need to go on the bus anymore. We've found it. And then, of course, the amazing production company that we worked with out there, who facilitated it all, Ildiko, she was like, well, just go and see the other options so you've got a backup. And of course, we spent hours going around places that weren't as good, which was great because it just confirmed we'd found it.
Well, Vicky, again, congratulations on a really fun movie. What would you like the conversation to be around these issues, and how does the movie contribute? What do you hope for the film, and sort of more action attention about centered on women, and how this can open up other opportunities?
I really hope lots of people are watching it. That's the most important thing, in order to prove that there is an appetite for female-driven action, and an ensemble female-driven action movie at that, because there's hardly any of those. And there's definitely very few where all the women survive. And the message at the end is women conquering all and women helping women. I would like to get more of those movies out there in the universe, and to get more of these kick-ass, empowering female role models out there for other young women who, it can be entertaining, but also quite wish-fulfilling at the same time. And I don't think I'm trying to do anything too heavy particularly. I'm just trying to give my 12-year-old self that wanted to be James Bond, like, that alternative.
Well, what's next for you, Vicky? What are you working on?
I have a script that myself and my co-writer, co-producer, husband Rupert, have written together, and we have taken that out at the moment. But we have the people that backed Pretty Lethal are up for doing another movie with us, which is great. So we should be able to start prep beginning of September.
Fingers crossed. Oh, I know. And again, that's always a challenge, as you talked about getting this film made. You never know what's going to come on the line, but we'll be rooting for you. And Vicky, it's been great having you on the show. On that note, we'll call it a wrap. Thanks so much. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, such a pleasure.
Thanks so much. Oh, it's awesome to meet you. I mean, you're a legend.
When have you to do a movie in the States? Hi.
Listeners, as I mentioned at the start, we're continuing to publish both audio and video edits of these episodes. So if you're listening to the podcast, consider checking us out on YouTube as well. However you're joining us, I always appreciate your feedback. My email address is skid@belowtheline, one word, .biz. That's B-I-Z. Closing credits, thanks to Curtis Five for our music and John Wan for our logo. The logo is available on t-shirts, mugs, and stickers at redbubble.com. If you enjoyed the show, please give us a positive rating and tell your friends. Thanks again from Below the Line. Post-credits banter. Now it's back to you guys. Thanks, guys, again for it. Vicky, this is a blast. I really, thanks for your patience on the technical side, and this was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and the movie was a lot of fun.
I hope I didn't, thanks. I hope I didn't talk over, because there's a delay, because I talk too much. I was worried I talked over you guys at times.
We will fix it in post. Fingers crossed.